Heaven is important, but it's not the end of the world. God is going to make a new world. And he started doing it in and through Jesus. Number one, kingdom of God. Number two, in order to get there, the rescue of Israel, which can be seen as the new Exodus, very frequent theme. God's going to rescue the slaves from their slavery again. Or it can be seen as the real return from exile. Okay, we came back from Babylon, but we are still slaves in our own land. So we need to be rescued from the evil which is oppressing us, both spiritually and politically. How is that going to happen? Well, all sorts of scenarios offer themselves. But if God is going to be king, then sure as anything, his people need to be rescued. And if his people aren't rescued, then God hasn't yet become king, which is why, of course, to this day, so many Jewish folk say, of course the kingdom of God hasn't come yet. Look out of the window. Look at the state of Israel, etc. But that's the second great thing. For God to become king, he's got to do the rescue operation. And, of course, the normal clunky technical term for rescue is salvation. But again, I find that if you say salvation, people at once think in terms of pie in the sky when you die. So I prefer to talk about God's great rescue operation, the new Exodus, the new return from exile, whatever it is. And third, and this is not so well known, but it's hugely important, and I have mentioned it before, the return of the Lord, of Yahweh himself, to Zion. It's there in Isaiah 40, it's there in Malachi, it's there in Ezekiel, it's there all over the place. He's gone, and we're puzzled about that, but he'll come back. And as I said in the first talk, what will it look like when he comes back? What will we see? What will we know? How will we know it's him, as it were? There's a sense in the temple in the first century of a sort of absence where there should be a presence. There's a memory, there's a possibility, but nobody says that the glory of the Lord has filled the house and the priest can't stand to minister because the cloud is there. Nobody ever says that. He's going to come back, but what will it look like? And so the whole theme of the day of the Lord, which meant the destruction of the temple by Babylon 500 years before for Jeremiah, and Amos earlier again, why do you desire the day of the Lord? It's a day of darkness, not light. They're longing for Yahweh to have his day. And then fourth, this will result in, of course it will result in, the overthrow of the pagan powers, cosmic and political. This is not just judgment in the sense of a neo-Kantian God who's got a categorical set of imperatives, who looks down from on high and says, you're all very naughty down there and I'm going to punish you horribly. You know, that's the parody of the biblical vision of God's judgment. The biblical vision of God's judgment is that powers that are looking after their own interest are enslaving God's world and enslaving human beings, and one day God is going to say, enough of that. That's the image you get in Psalms 96 and 98 and so many others, where judgment is not something which we should simply be scared of and think, oh dear, God really is a mean old bully after all. Judgment is the moment of celebration, because judgment in the Hebrew world means putting things right, sorting out the mess, and the trees and the rivers and the sheep and everything will celebrate because Yahweh is coming to judge the world, to overthrow. You see how it models onto the overthrow of Egypt in the Exodus, how it models onto the overthrow of Assyria in the 8th century crisis, how it sits on what Isaiah says about Babylon being overthrown. Come out of her, my people. God is going to judge her. That's part of this image of kingdom, rescue, return. And then fifthly, new creation. New creation. We've had it in Isaiah 55. We're going to have it again. Wonderful, wonderful passage. Unaccountably, the lectionary omits the last lines of that amazing passage. As the rain and the snow come down and return not thither, but water the earth, you know it as well as I do. So shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but shall accomplish that which I purpose. And then the new creation. Isaiah 40 to 55 is one great, long, amazing poem. And as I said at the beginning, so I repeat, if Isaiah 40 to 55 had been lost and now turned up in some archaeological dig in the Middle East somewhere, we would say this is one of the most amazing pieces of sustained poetry ever written. Finishing where it began, with the word bringing about new creation. You shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills will burst into song. The trees of the field shall clap their hands. And then think of Genesis 3 and think of Isaiah 5. Instead of the thorn shall come up the cypress. Instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle. It shall be to the Lord for a memorial, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. New creation, new heavens and new earth, Isaiah 65 and 66, full of God's healing justice. God's restorative justice is that which will put the whole world to rights, so that all the beauty and power and amazing glory that is already there in the wonderful created world that we've been given to inhabit and enjoy will be enhanced to the nth degree. And we will see and be amazed as creation itself celebrates. That's the fifth point. The sixth point is that who's going to be in charge of this? It will be the God-reflecting human being, the image-bearing human being, who is ultimately the king. Put together Psalm 2 with Psalm 8. Psalm 8, what are human beings that you take thought for them? You made them little lower than the angels to crown them with glory and honor, putting all things in subjection under their feet. And see the way in which there's a fluidity in the Old Testament between that image of the human destiny to be at last under God and over the world, and the messianic destiny that there will be one person who will embody this uniquely. Psalm 2, ask of me and I will give you the nations for your possession. Psalm 72, his dominion will be from one sea to the other, from the river to the ends of the earth. Jesus will be in charge. I'm running too far ahead. The Messiah will be in charge. God's coming king, who will bring God's healing justice to the world. That's the sixth point. Then the seventh point is that, of course, when all this happens, the Torah, the law, which was the blueprint for Israel's national life as the people who were the royal priesthood, the Torah will be gloriously fulfilled in a new way that it's hard to imagine. That, at their best, was what the Pharisees were trying to do. They knew that in God's coming day the Torah will be fulfilled, so they were making more and more and more sub-Torah kind of rules and regulations to help people do that. And however misguided we may say they were, that's what their vision was at its best. There will be a new covenant in which Yahweh will write the law on the hearts of his people. And then eighth, going really with number 3, but I wanted to make it separate, the glory of the Lord will fill the temple. That's the image at the end of Ezekiel, which picks up the image from the end of the book of Exodus, and which is then resonating out through so many bits of the Old Testament. In his temple all cry glory. That's what there is there. The glory of... And you see, there's a wonderful book by the American scholar Greg Beale, B-E-A-L-E. The book is called The Temple and the Church's Mission. And Greg Beale wrote that book because he wrote a big fat commentary on Revelation, wonderful commentary, don't agree with all of it, it's a great commentary. And when he got to the end, as a good scholar of Judaica, he realized that this picture of the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21:22 is a picture of a temple, a cube, a holy place. Why is it a temple? And the answer, which you can fill in from right through the Old Testament and into testamental Judaism, is that that's what God intended for the whole creation. The whole creation was a house where God intended to dwell, heaven and earth together. But when humans mess it up, God calls Israel and says, I'm going to dwell in a little tent in your midst. And then here's David planning a proper house. But the house was never meant to be an end in itself. It was a signpost to the moment when the whole earth would be full of the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And you can see this in odd little hints and flashes right through the Old Testament. The temple and the Holy Land as a sign pointing forward to the day when Yahweh would claim the whole earth and fill it with his glory.